people that are healthy and that focus on their fitness and that train, if you back away from that, if you even miss a couple workouts, your body starts to feel off.
Right.
And at least in my case, like my body starts to feel off, and then my cognitive abilities start to decline too. And I've always battled, I'm very open about like some of the PTSD stuff or some depression that starts to work its way in. That stuff gets amplified when you're not taking care of yourself. And so, I mean, we have a large portion of our society that even before the pandemic didn't know how to take care of themselves. And the normal thing to go get dinner with your family is the McDonald's drive-thru. And then you take away all of their outlets now, and it's just gonna continue to spiral downhill.
Hey there, welcome back to another show. So today we take a deep dive into mental health. We know that feelings of depression, social isolation, unfortunately are at an all-time high. Not only just in the adults and in the elderly especially, but also in our children. We know that suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, drug overdoses are unfortunately very high in our children. And it's even concerning now for a lot of specialists that are seeing this clinically and seeing the reverberations and the side effects of and all the unintended harms linked with our response to the whole virus. So today we catch up with Greg Anderson to explore this because he has experienced depression and PTSD because he served for over a decade in the special operations and paramilitary community. He was also a law enforcement officer, and I'll get into his background more in just a moment. But he leans on things like intermittent fasting, like eating whole, real, unprocessed food, like having a great sense of community. In his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu studio here in Snohomish, Washington, he has an infrared sauna. He does contrast therapy. He's doing a lot to make sure that he is not another statistic of someone who took their life because of feelings of depression or PTSD. So he leverages all these different things, and we weave that into this conversation that I think is a great conversation. And the way that I connected with Greg was because May 5th, 2020, when the world was really uncertain with all the lockdowns and all these new policies and politicians getting involved in our lives, he was seeing, unfortunately, many viral videos of police officers, which he was one and was one for many years, arresting civilians like people like you and I for bringing our children to the park. He saw too many moms getting arrested for bringing their toddlers out to the park here in Washington State. And in California, there was viral videos of paddleboarders being arrested for being out in the ocean that was somehow considered dangerous, right? And so he made a video to discourage other police and law enforcement officers from making egregious arrests for people like you and I, citizens here of this great country in America. And unfortunately, that video, although it did impact a lot of people and was pretty motivating for me because I was worried, like, where is this whole thing going? That video, unfortunately, cost Greg his job as a law enforcement officer, but he's used that, he's parlayed that momentum into his new career to educate people and expand his gym and do much more. So check out his work. He's got a great podcast as well called the Endless Endeavor Podcast. Now, this podcast today is brought to you by our sister company, Myoscience Nutrition. Tools to help you support your sleep and recovery. And one of the things, again, that's intimately linked with mental well-being and recovery from exercise and mood and libido and all of that is sleep. If you're not sleeping properly, you can be setting yourself up to fail when it comes to failing on a new intermittent fasting program or a new exercise program or much more. So I'm all about helping individuals like you support your sleep. And one of the solutions that we found to be very effective is combining a powdered sleep formula with a little bit of hemp extract, a broad spectrum, non-genetically modified and certified glyphosate-free organic hemp liquid paired with some really powerful nutrients like L-theanine, taurine, myo-inositol, and GABA. So this is a new sleep enhancer bundle from Myoscience Nutrition that you can check out that is really effective for enhancing sleep. So you can go over to myoscience.com. That's MYOXCIENC.com. That's myoscience with an X.com, and check out the new Sleep Enhancer Bundle. So how you would use this is put a dropper full of the hemp oil under your tongue for about 30 to 45 seconds. And this is about 30 minutes before bed, and have 1 to 2 servings of My Relax and Calm. Again, about 30 minutes before bed. Now, all of these nutrients are unique in that they're restorative and they help to foster deep restorative sleep without monkeying with the sleep architecture. So we know that REM sleep is super delicate. Deep wave sleep is super delicate. You don't want to tweak those. And that's unfortunately what a lot of shall we say, over-the-counter sleep aids do is they get you to sleep, but they monkey with the sleep architecture, which you don't want. And that's what's great about these natural products. So you can check them out on the website and the links below, and you can use the coupon code podcast at checkout.
It goes both ways. A lot of people's livelihoods were crushed. Totally. A lot of people lost everything that they worked for. But what I've seen is the people that are willing to stand up and show some courage, they've been rewarded. Yeah. And that's why my gym's doing so well. Yeah, I got some notoriety and my gym was kind of cast into the public eye a little bit, which helped us grow. But also, we openly defied the orders. And that alone, I mean, our kids program alone probably has 50 kids in it now. Wow. And that's because we have, I mean, both of us being parents, we've seen it. You take your kid and you don't socialize them. Their sports are shut down. They're staring at screens way more than they normally are. And it was starting to have an effect on my own kids, and I was seeing it. Mm. And so I was able to get them enrolled in private school, and then they're training jiu-jitsu. So many other parents are in that same boat. And so we got hit up a lot, being like, is your kids program open? Is your kids program open? And we got to the point where we're like, families need this.
Totally.
You know? And obviously, like with my gym being my main source of income, yeah, I mean, it's not bad to be financially motivated. It was a good time to develop a program that a lot of people were in need of, and we made it very affordable. I mean, my child rate is $60 a month, and that's for 2 classes a week.
Wow.
And so if you break it down, people aren't paying much, but they're getting something that their child needs. And so we defied the orders. We started running those programs, and they're huge now.
That's amazing.
And so I feel like I'm actually shocked that more people didn't do that. Like for one person, in our case, our governor, Jay Inslee, to tell you, hey, everything you've worked for, everything you've created, shut it down. And then everybody just says, yes, okay. It's bizarre to me.
Totally bizarre, especially when the data, I mean, maybe people don't look at the research, as much as maybe someone like myself does, but it's very clear. Exercise supports your immune system health. Mm-hmm. And the de-stressing, think about how many moms who their outlet, their 1 hour to themselves a day was going to the gym.
Yes.
And they couldn't do this.
Yeah.
They couldn't shop. They couldn't go to the gym. They couldn't go get their hair done, whatever. So they're stuck at homes trying to be the best parents they can. So what do? They turn to alcohol. They turn to junk food. And that makes them more susceptible to not only getting seriously sick from this particular virus, but many other
of them, right?
Depression, marriage issues. It's crazy.
No, and the numbers are coming out with mental health and suicides and domestic violence and substance abuse. Like, that skyrocketed through 2020.
Yeah.
And nobody should be surprised by that. Like, people that are healthy and that focus on their fitness and that train, if you back away from that, if you even miss a couple workouts, your body starts to feel off.
Right.
And at least in my case, like, my body starts to feel off, and then my cognitive abilities start to decline too. And I've always battled, I'm very open about like some of the PTSD stuff or some depression that starts to work its way in. That stuff gets amplified when you're not taking care of yourself. And so, we have a large portion of our society that even before the pandemic didn't know how to take care of themselves. And the normal thing to go get dinner with your family is the McDonald's drive-thru. And then you take away all of their outlets now. And it's just gonna continue to spiral downhill,
It's scary. Diving into your transparent, open and honest conversation, about being depressed and thinking about suicide and everything like that. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because I have this theory about NFL football players, right, where they have repeated trauma to their brain, obviously, but they also have the camaraderie of having the team and traveling with the team and all that. And then all of a sudden they retire, you take that away.
Gone.
So I wonder, obviously head trauma is an issue with creating feelings of being depressed or lonely or anxious, right? But then there's also, you take away that other precipitating factor of well, they have a social connection. I wonder how much of that, because, serving in Iraq, right? You've been in military, you've had a lot of camaraderie from a professional setting. Do you think that is a future of this depression in people that you've seen take their own lives?
I think it's, I actually really love that you asked that question, because I talk about that often. I think PTSD, obviously there's a large portion of it is you saw terrible things or your buddies got blown up, and it's people wake up with terrible nightmares of reliving some of those moments. But in my own personal experience, what I've kind of dealt with my own, and then also my peer group, it's exactly what you said. It's being part of something that you felt was important. You're part of a tribe, and you had that camaraderie, and you had a mission, and you just felt like you were doing something that mattered, right? And then in a moment, I mean, in the military, I was an Army Ranger in a platoon of 35 guys that did everything together. And literally the next day, I'm living with my parents, sleeping in my old bedroom in a twin bed, wondering what I'm going to do next, you know? And so that's a weird transition for people. And what they're finding is, so the military is finding that TBI, traumatic brain injury, and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, I want to say like when they're diagnosing that, 11 of the symptoms are identical. So you're walking a fine line, and it's going to be hard to determine, is this post-traumatic stress or is this TBI? Or like you said, in the NFL case or with most soldiers, it's probably a combination of both, you know? But yeah, they're finding that like guys, like I was exposed to lots of blasts and overpressure, and they're finding that does contribute to depression and suicidal ideations just because it changes how the brain chemistry works. So
you mentioned blasts, and you said the overpressures. What's like one or two memories to kind of visualize that so people can understand like what that is?
And so like when I talk about overpressure, so I've been hit with a lot of like incoming IEDs, things like that, but I've never actually had like a fragment of shrapnel enter my body. So if you like, they call them invisible wounds, right? Because it does affect the body, but you're not getting a Purple Heart because you stand up and you dust yourself off and you're like, oh, I'm good. I made it, you know? But I remember I was on a rooftop in Ramadi, and for those that are familiar with Ramadi, it was the government center right off of Route Michigan. And I was on the roof, and that roof got hit with a mortar, and probably 20 meters away. And me and my buddy were standing there, and it knocked us both down. And you think like, oh shit, I'm a mess, right? And you start looking and kind of feeling yourself and like, how in the hell am I not hurt, you know? And then you laugh it off because it's like, oh, fuck, man, we're good. And we were both sitting there laughing. And, but the amount of shock and overpressure that your body's subjected to, I mean, I don't even know how you would explain it, but you feel it in your core, you know? It's like, I mean, just like when we were kids throwing M80s, times that by 1,000 and lay it next to you. And it's just, you feel it all the way to your core, you know?
Right. Because it knocks you down
physically. Yeah, it knocks you down physically.
Your brain's moving around inside your head. Yeah.
And it's just like, you know, you hear the analogy on car wrecks, like there's 3 collisions. There's the car versus the object. Then it's your head versus your dashboard. And then it's your brain versus your skull. And blast explosions are very similar to that, you know? Right. So, but I think this was in 2003. And so the wars were still relatively new, and people weren't really aware of this. And now that we've been into this 2 decades, which is insane in itself, they're starting to put the pieces together and realize just how traumatic and how like the long lasting effects of all that stuff. Because IEDs and incoming, that was the weapon of choice in Iraq and Afghanistan.
How would that be like launched or propelled? Is it a person throws it or a helicopter? Or
so mortars in Ramadi, at least, you have to have a mortar tube, right? So it's a weapon system, and it's a tube that, to help listeners visualize, is probably big enough to drop like a grapefruit down. You know, they have different, they have, or they have smaller ones probably for like the size of a can of soda would drop down. But what they do is they mount them in the back of a pickup truck. So it's on a mobile platform. They dump 2, 3, 5 mortars. And they're not very accurate. So more often than not, you're not in much danger. They miss way more often than they hit, but it's just a percentage thing, right?
Yeah.
And so they'll launch 4 or 5 mortars, and then they'll reposition the truck. And the reason that they do that is the bases in Iraq, they have radar nets over the top of the base. And obviously there's no physical net. It's literally just layers of radar. that they stack over the bases. And those radars can pick up the trajectory of the mortar coming in. So it passes through this, it picks up the speed and angle, and then they can calculate exactly where it was launched from. So then they do counter battery to blow up the location it came from, right? So that's why the enemy keeps it mobile, where a couple rounds and then they're moving. Or they'll launch from like city centers or like public bazaars, places where they know the Americans aren't going to launch a counterattack. And so it's just a constant game of cat and mouse.
Oh, man.
I mean, our base got mortared 40 times a month on average. And the base was probably the size of 3 football fields. Jeez. So not a large base.
Right.
It was called Camp Blue Diamond, and it was right along the river there in Ramadi. And just every day, you know, you're getting mortared, you know?
That's got to be stressful.
You know, what's interesting is you reach a point where it's just normal life. And we used to joke like, yeah, today's probably the day that I finally get blown up. And you have to put your like concern of your own mortality on the back burner. Because if you're afraid that you're going to get hurt or killed, why are you even there?
Right.
You know, you're going to be combat ineffective.
You're going to act weird and everything like that.
And not only for your physical safety, but also your emotional well-being. I've talked about a lot on the show. Like you see kids get killed or you see civilians get blown up. I mean, that should make you, that should evoke some pretty strong emotions, and it didn't. Like to the opposite. I remember a lot of guys would be like, fuck those kids. In 10 years, they're going to have AK-47s in their hand and be shooting at us, which is a very, in that moment, maybe a coping mechanism, because nobody wants to see kids get killed.
No
Come
way.
on.
Yeah.
But I think that's how you justify what you're doing and why you're there and all that stuff. At least for me, when I came home, I didn't reflect on all that stuff until I had my own kids. Then you're holding this baby and looking at it, and it's like, they're just babies.
Right.
Over here, over there. Like, what's the difference? There's not any, you know? And I just think that's a natural progression of men. And, well, I would say women as well, is like in your early 20s, you're not thinking big picture. You're more thinking like what's right in front of your face. And then as you grow and kind of reflect back on that stuff, that's when it starts to hit you.
Yeah.
I've lost 3 buddies to suicide inside of the last 24 months. And all of them have been about 10 years after their last deployment. Wow. So there's something that happens at that 10-year mark. And I've talked to other people about it that say they've noticed the same thing. And it's just, you get detached from that lifestyle, and then you're doing different things. And then you're in a position in life where like you're able to reflect. Because when you're deployed, you're not able to reflect, you know? And if you know you're redeploying in 6 months, you don't want to unpack all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. You want to be tough and pack it away.
Yeah.
But getting back to like, so you come home and life is way easier, right? Because your mom, if you're living with your mom or your wife, is cooking for you. There's no risk of mortar. So you would think that people would be more happy there, but it's kind of interesting. Like humans are built for strife. I feel
exactly right. And I actually don't think that it's easier. And people that have never been part of the special operations community probably think that that's kind of a strange outlook. But I've always told people being an Army Ranger is actually very simple. It's physically demanding, and it can be emotionally taxing at times. But as far as, hey, we're getting up at 6 a.m., we're going on a 5-mile run. You hit the chow hall after that. You draw your weapon. We'll hit range 7 and we'll shoot for the next 4 hours. Turn your weapon in. Like everything's very structured, and it's structured in a manner that you know what's happening today. You know what's happening tomorrow. You know what's happening like months from now. Then you deploy, and deployments can be a lot more chaotic just because there's someone else that gets a say in how everything plays out, right? But it's still, we understand why we're there. We understand what the mission is. We understand where we're going, what we're going to be utilized for. And so your day-to-day life is very structured. And even though, like I said, it may be physically demanding, it's pretty easy once you get into the rhythm. And then when you fall out of that rhythm, there's a bunch of unknowns in front of you. Yeah. And I think that scares a lot of guys because you're going through unknowns by yourself now. at least when you were going through unknowns before, you had your 30-man platoon with you. And so, I mean, have you read Tribe, Sebastian Younger? Like, his whole book talks about like the primal need for having people in your life and like nurturing that tribalism that is hardwired into us.
Right.
And the military does a good job at that. And when you step away from that, it's like, oh shit, now what?
Yeah.
I tell people all the time that I thought that I would find that in law enforcement, and I never did. And I don't say that like disparagingly, because I worked with tons of good people, but it wasn't quite that level of like, they felt like a brother or a sister, you know? I've actually got that more through jiu-jitsu.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of firemen kind of have that. My stepfather was a fireman. And so they would like the shifts were 48 on and then 4 days off. So you're with some people for like 2 days straight.
Yeah.
So you develop a lot of that. But as a patrol officer, you're probably crossing paths. You see each other in the gym maybe, but you're on your own kind of.
Yeah. And then the other thing is like, at least at my department, you would bid a shift based on seniority, and that would be a shift for 1 year. And so you'd work with a group of guys for a year, and then it's different the next year. And it's different the next year. And it's funny because some of your coworkers that you're with every day, they like, I might work Sunday, Monday, Tuesday days, and then they bid Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, and you literally never see that person again, you know? So the other side of law enforcement though, and again, this is just my experience, there's so much drama. And there's cliques, and there's people talking shit on each other, and there's people filing grievances. And just to like work your way through all that stuff is exhausting. Yeah. And it kills that sense of like, we're in this together, because it feels like there's a lot of backstabbing and a lot of posturing and just weird stuff like that. So I never saw any of that in the military, you know?
That is weird. Is that a leverage to climb the corporate ladder, so to speak?
Sure.
In the
100%. So leadership, I love leadership. It's something that I like geek out on. But leadership in the military, at least in my experience, leadership above you is always watching and analyzing and seeing who are guys that they can go to and trust and ask to complete tasks. And inevitably, those are the guys that get promoted. Like, I was promoted to sergeant against my will. Like,
wow.
I didn't want a sergeant, you know?
How come?
I didn't feel like I was ready for it. I was 21, you know, and I just got called in the hooch, and they said, hey, you're promoted to sergeant effective immediately. This is your team. And I was like, oh no. Like,
you accepted it, but mentally you were like, I don't know if, did you think there's this, you know, sort of, if you ask, like, there's a study at Stanford a business school, really hard to get into. It's like top 2% in business schools. There was a social scientist that gave a presentation there and asked them on the first day of school, how many of you think you were here by a mistake? It was 80% of them raised their hand. So the so-called imposter syndrome is like really real. So I wonder if you felt that.
Probably to a certain extent. I think the other side of it too is just, if a promotion doesn't make you feel nervous, you're probably not very well suited for the job. Because with a promotion comes more responsibility. Other people are counting on you. Other people are looking to you for answers now. Like, I don't care how proficient you are in your job. If you're being honest with yourself, I think almost everybody should feel a sense of like, oh, okay. Like, I got to keep my shit wired tight, because more is riding on this than previously. And everybody in jiu-jitsu will tell you the same thing. Like last night, for example, one of my brown belts, and that's the one rank under black belt, right? He actually kicked my ass pretty bad.
Wow. And
that never happens, right? Like, at my gym, and I'm not saying like I'm great at jiu-jitsu, but in my gym, I'm a pretty big fish in a little pond. And I don't get beat up very often. And he poured it on me, right? And I mean, it is what it is. If you have good days and bad days, no matter what you're doing. But I joked to him afterwards. I was like, maybe you're ready for a promotion after that round. Right. And he's like, no. He goes, how long were you a brown belt? I said 5 years. He goes, then I want to be one for 6. Like, the thought of getting promoted, to most people, they don't want it, because that's, again, it's easier Because your jiu-jitsu is going to grow. Your jiu-jitsu is going to be your jiu-jitsu, and you're going to get good regardless of the color of cloth wrapped around your waist. But what comes with that color of cloth is more eyes on you, more questions, more responsibility, more expectations. So I think humans are just, if you're content where you're at, people like to ride it out, you know? In law enforcement, in my experience, the best guys aren't raising their hand saying, me, I want to be promoted, I want to be promoted. It's the people that have no business being promoted. And squeaky wheel gets the grease in law enforcement.
I have a buddy, his name is Ryan, and he was a detective and law enforcement officer in the Salt Lake City area for a number of years. And he was saying that the perception of being a police officer has totally been skewed. I mean, this was even pre-George Floyd, and stuff like that. But that, it's like when I grew up, it was cool to have little toys of cop cars and fire trucks. And as a boy, you were like, you really looked up to, and you go to the police station. This was really cool. Now society has kind of deemed that there's like a stain there there's this perception. So where I'm going with this is he was saying getting good people has been tough for different departments.
I feel like getting good people has been tough. And then I also feel like maybe a lot of departments don't want good people. Or I shouldn't say good people, but like free thinkers and people that are willing to stand up for what's right. I mean, my case is a perfect example of that. I never had any discipline. No one in my department had anything bad to say about me. My chief was actually begging me to promote to sergeant. And I was like, I'm not ready to promote to sergeant. And then I get canned over a video. And I've seen similar things happen. If you stand up for anything that you think is right, then they snuff you out. And I mean, and again, not to take this down like political lines or not, but if you, in this area, and I worked in Los Angeles and Seattle as a law enforcement officer. It's a very liberal area. So if you express any type of conservative views, get this guy out of here, because we have officers that supported like LGBTQ and BLM and that kind of stuff openly. Nobody ever said anything. But if you stand for something publicly on the right in this area, it's like a witch hunt.
You're marked.
Yeah,
you're tagged.
It's weird.
Huh. That is bizarre. I mean, you think most people that go into the police force would be because you're handling firearms.
Yeah.
There's physical altercations. So you might be more libertarian or conservative.
I would definitely say the majority of police officers are.
Yeah.
And, it was like I was saying before we started recording, every single cop I know, not most, not 95%, every single one. I don't know the cop that's like, we should be shutting people's businesses down. We should go to the park and arrest those people. Like, I've yet to meet that cop. So why were we seeing it? That's what's just so bizarre about this whole thing, is that most cops are aligned on their thinking is aligned on these issues. But everybody, to a certain extent, if you're getting a paycheck from someone, you have to play the game to a certain extent.
Right.
And so, at least in my department, the Port of Seattle, it's a corporation. It's not a municipality, right? And so it's known for being a very liberal, left-leaning corporation, and everyone's afraid to buck the system because that's what feeds their children,
So the police chief, was that Carmen Best for you, or was that?
No.
Okay.
No. My police chief name was Rod Covey. So Port of Seattle and Seattle, while we share very similar jurisdiction, actually separate agencies.
Gotcha. So. I want to ask you a little bit about her, but okay. So it was May 5th. I remember I was telling you offline, I was working out. I was forwarded the video. And at first I'm like, oh, this cop's going to say he's arresting people, cause you just see a cop in the car. I'm like, and this crazy stuff was going on. Like we were talking about in LA, someone was getting arrested for paddleboarding by themselves in the ocean. Right.
Yeah,
so you didn't know.
Very dangerous activity.
It's just ridiculous. But so I'm like, and then at like 20 seconds in, I'm like, this video is going to be really good. Now I looked at the views. I'm like, wow, it's like 700K. I'm like, this is awesome. So I'm really excited about it. So you posted the video. I want to ask you about your intentions later, but so how soon after were you reprimanded?
The next day.
You woke up to a text or an email?
Well, that's funny. I woke up to the text from my patrol commander, highest ranking person in patrol, that said, your video is awesome. And you have 1,000% support from us.
Wow.
I can show you that text when we're done. Like I saved it, right? And then 3 hours after that, same guy reached out to me and goes, I've been directed to tell you to pull the video. Coward, right? Like if you say that, you have 1000% support, then stand behind your word. Mm-hmm. I'm not asking anyone to fall on a sword for me. I made that decision and I'll take it. And no one has to go down with me. But don't say that you love it and that you're in support unless you're going to support. And that's the biggest problem that I've seen in the profession is like people's, how they feel and how they act are very often not congruent. And so, yeah, 3 hours later, that same guy said, well, I was directed to tell you to take it down. And I said, well, Chief Thomas has my fucking phone number.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
He can call me and say that too. And I said, well, here's the bottom line. In that video, I implored officers to stand up for what they believe, even if it costs you your job, because people's rights come before our paychecks, right? I literally said that. So if I'm going to say that and implore officers to do that, and then I have to rescind my words, so I can't do that. I'm going to lose the respect of everybody that I know. And so I said, if you have to fire me for making a video that you said you supported, then you're going to have to, that's how it's going to have to be. And he was like, Greg, don't do this. Like, come on, man. Like giving me the,
like just do it.
Come on. Like,
yeah.
And then they even said, the video's already been ripped and reposted. So if you pull yours down, your message won't get lost. Everybody will still see the video, but you'll at least show our agency that you're willing to follow this order. I said, I'm not willing to follow the order. So I'm not going to pretend that I am, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Did he fire you then or out?
No. So anytime you work for the government, typically you have to do something criminal to get fired. It's very hard to get fired as a police officer. I know guys that have been reprimanded 50 times and they're still cops. I had zero discipline in my package, you know? But anytime someone is up for termination, there's an investigation process and the union gets involved. And so I didn't get, I was put on administrative leave May 6th, the day after the video. And then I didn't get terminated until August 7th.
Okay. So it's
a several month process where they review it and then they have a panel of people speak about it. And then they bring lawyers in to review and they determine if and what policies you violated. And
what was the specific policy that they said you violated?
So what they ended up getting me on was insubordination, because nothing that I did specifically in that video was a violation of policy. I don't know if you noticed, but I was careful. I understood my policy. I turned my hat around backwards so you couldn't see Port of Seattle. I held it in a manner where you couldn't see my badge on my vest because it also said Port of Seattle. And I didn't identify myself with that agency. And that's the port's policy. We don't want you identifying yourself as a police officer with this agency online. Okay. And so what they ended up getting me on insubordination because they told me to take the video down and I told them no. And so he's like, I'm giving you a direct order. I'm like, a direct order? What is that?
Yeah.
That's something out of a movie. Okay. I'm not taking the video down.
Right. Good for you, man, to stand up and yeah, I mean, you inspired a lot of people and gave us hope for America, because it was kind of like, where is this thing going? I mean, this is crazy. I mean,
I honestly believed, and maybe I'm out in left field with this, but I honestly believed that if cops kept arresting women in parks, that people were going to start gunning down cops. Like, I didn't want the wedge between the public's trust and law enforcement to be driven even deeper. Just like you said, when you were a kid, you had toys of police officers.
Right.
We looked up to them. They were referred to as heroes. And I feel like the public's trust and the profession is always there's an ebb and flow to it, right? But I feel like for the first time in a long time, like cops weren't looked at as the bad guy all the time. And then inside of a month, everybody hated cops again. Fuck the police. All cops are bitches. Like all these things all over online, right? And I'm like, the weird thing is that the public, it's not the police that they should be hating. It's all of these politicians that are using this disease as a political tool to manipulate things and manipulate the economy. And that's what happened. And if anyone's not willing to admit that, I don't think they're being honest with themselves. Right after the inauguration, COVID's becoming a thing of the past already. And we all called it.
The cycle count, the PCR cycle count went down. Schools are opening. Businesses all of a sudden open.
The CNN death count that was it was like a spinning clock at the bottom. The day after the inauguration, they took that down. We don't need to incite fear anymore. And so I felt, even though people shouldn't be mad at the police, well, as soon as they start enforcing this stuff, now they do have a right to be mad. And so I was watching this take place in real time, and I was like, we got to do something. The profession needs to let these politicians know we don't work for you. We work for the community. We serve the people. We don't serve a mayor. And man, that is why it resonated with so many people, because so many people felt like their rights were being trampled on. And then I thought about it. Like, I mean, if I was at the park with my daughters and my wife, and some patrol officer came up to my wife and started putting her in handcuffs, when I'm confronted with violence or that kind of stuff, I become very unreasonable. And that's myself. I'm sure there's a lot of people that their fuse is a lot shorter than mine. And I was like, this is going to go bad nationwide. And man, who knows how it would have played out? The George Floyd thing changed the trajectory of our entire nation in a moment.
Well, that's where I was going with this, is like, you had a really good insight way before that even happened. You know, a month before, the perception, you didn't want the perception of police officers to be tarnished. And then look at what happened. It got completely tarnished from that. And
but I don't think those two things are not related. I think the media and the political elite used this as a moment to make people hate cops. Then they could continue pushing, because George Floyd, that was the main thing for like a few months. And then it's back to, we're shutting your businesses down. Your kids can't go back to school. All the same shit started getting promoted again, but now people hated the police nationwide.
Getting back to some of the training, with police, and I've been, a lot of people that we've interviewed and people that watch this show do some form of mixed martial arts, you're a big fan of jiu-jitsu, having a gym and all that. But I think there's this kind of idea that some of these altercations with criminals and police can be de-escalated just verbally, but that's not what Marietta, Georgia had shown. Like officers being trained in mixed martial arts can actually quickly de-escalate and lead to less injury for both the officer and the
100%. And I think every human being, law enforcement or not, has a lot to gain by becoming a proficient fighter, being able to handle yourself with your own body. And I mean, I did mixed martial arts for a long time, and then I moved forward primarily with jiu-jitsu just because I didn't want to keep getting punched in the face. Like, it reaches a point where it's like, okay, as a 40-year-old man, I'm not chasing a UFC dream, right? But especially as police officers, like we were saying before we started recording, if your job is to put your hands on people and arrest people, then you should probably know how to put your hands on people and control them. But what I found even more beneficial than the physical ability to control someone and arrest them is, like you said, de-escalation, talking people off the ledge, or basically talking people into handcuffs. And if you're confident in your abilities, what that does is it directly impacts your ability to resolve an altercation without it ever becoming physical. Because, I mean, human beings are animals. They pick up on all the little things, right? And if you're trying to arrest someone, but you're scared, deep down inside, you're nervous, you don't want to fight this guy, like, they're picking up on all those cues too, right? Whereas once you're very comfortable with your abilities, that projects confidence. And if you're projecting confidence on people, they probably don't want to have an altercation with you. And that goes for anybody. That's not just cops arresting people that are committing crimes. That's anybody. And I mean, I've told the story on the podcast before, but since we're going out on both our shows, I was talking to a guy on a criminal trespass issue whose ears looked worse than mine. Like, he had giant cauliflower ears. And so I immediately knew like, okay, this guy's a fighter. And in police work, we call them pre-assault indicators, like clenching the fists, tensing up, like breathing, different respiration rates and whatnot. He was showing all of those. So instead of amping him up, I was just like, hey, bro, I can see you're a fighter. I see your ears. You can see mine. I'm a fighter too. And I can see your behavior, right? And I was like, if you want to take it to a fight, we can take it to a fight, but it's going to be your option. And if we both like fighting, we'll probably beat the fuck out of each other, okay? Or we can be cool with each other too.
Right.
So I'll put the ball in your court. Just letting him know, like, I see all this. I'm not intimidated at all. And if you want to fight, we can fight. And dude, immediately, he's like, I've never had a fucking cop be this cool to me, man. I appreciate that.
Wow.
This is awesome. And then starting to talk to the guy, he was a collegiate wrestler. He wanted to be an MMA fighter, so he moved to Seattle to join some gym, and then he got addicted to methamphetamine. And I was like, if anyone hasn't trained with a collegiate wrestler, it's like, it's one of the worst things.
Intense.
Yeah, because they're super athletes, but they also have a high level of technical skills. And so for any cop that put their hands on that guy that is untrained, it's going to be a long night.
Bad news.
But you could resolve that with words just because you have some understanding of that battle space. And then you also have the ability to even though he would have been a fight, at the same time, it's not intimidating either. Okay. So like, and you see that a lot. And it's just how you stand. It's how you talk to people. It's your posture. Once you're proficient in martial arts, it's a little different.
Right.
And so, but for whatever reason, and like you said, that Marietta, Georgia study showed not only did injuries to police officers go down dramatically. Do you remember the percentage?
I
was
can't
like 50% or something crazy.
Yeah.
But the same percentage of injuries to suspects, because now it's not just this frantic, we're rolling on the ground and I'm grabbing for my taser. It's like, I took this dude down, I mounted him, I put him in a Kimura and I handcuffed him. That guy is not getting hurt either through that exchange. And so, but what it comes down to, in my opinion, is there's people that want to chase a difficult life, and then there's people that want to chase the easy life. And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if that's a choice or if that's like hardwired into us. But a lot of people don't want to put the work in.
That's crazy to me. I mean, if I was a cop, I would want as much training as possible.
You would think.
Even if you have a firearm, and how effective is a taser?
Well, I mean, I've never tased someone. 10 years, well, 8.5 actual being on duty as a law enforcement officer. I never tased someone. And I attribute that to being a good grappler. I never, like, the back of my mind was never like, go to your taser. Like, if it's go time, it's go time. And so I always told people, I wish I could just carry a gun and that's it. Because if it's not a lethal force scenario, mace and a baton and a taser, like all that stuff, I'm more comfortable with just my body because that's what I put the time in.
Right.
If you like a baton, then you better be putting the time in with it, but nobody is, And tasers fail too. If you hit someone's belt or you hit like a collar on like a thick coat or something and the prong doesn't get connection, then you don't get what's called NMI, neuromuscular incapacitation. And if you don't get that, it doesn't work. And so that's another thing. Like if you like the taser and you train on it and you're proficient at it, cool, right? But you also have to understand it has it's not foolproof. So if it doesn't work, what's plan B?
And then that's when the fear and the anxiety, because if you go in on someone big and it doesn't work, I mean,
exactly,
you could just,
and a lot of people you can see rely. They think, I mean, one of my buddies told me, I won't say her name, but it's a person at my department. He was talking to her and he said they confronted this huge felon that had a warrant, just a monster, right? And he goes, I could tell the guy was not a guy you wanted to fight. Like he was just putting off that vibe. And he goes, thank God he went willingly and it didn't escalate. Because you can feel the energy, right? He said it was reaching the tipping point where like, okay, is this guy going to go or is he going to fight? Like, where are we going with this? And then as soon as he got it, he put him in cuffs and put him in the back of the car. He said he walked up to that officer and said to her, he's like, thank God, that went well. And she looked at him and goes, what are you talking about? Why do you think we have all these tools on our belt? If it doesn't go well, we're ready. And it's like, oh no. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
He thought she would be in agreement with him.
But he's like, I was shocked that she thought this giant super athlete that was super agitated wouldn't be a problem because you got a taser on your belt. You're not being honest with yourself.
Right.
You know? So
that's crazy, man. Well, I mean, it kind of speaks, to the human condition a little bit, because when COVID hit, and even right now, the data is coming out showing that like the more visceral fat you have, prediabetes, metabolic diseases. So everyone should be exercising, eating well, but you drive through, you pass Chick-fil-A, the drive-through is stacked. You look at McDonald's, it's
well,
stacked.
hey, you can get their grilled chicken bites. That's not the end of the world, right?
No, I know.
I know.
I've never actually been there. I don't know why it's such a phenomenon, but people love it. But if police officers who are, like you said, it's not if they will have an encounter, it's when. Like if
100%.
you're going to have this encounter, but yet you're not putting in the time to make you a better officer, and then carry that thinking on to people know that there's a high probability that, especially now, this virus is going to be endemic. It's going to circulate around. A lot of people are not putting in the work to make themselves more resilient. They're just like, I'll take the vaccine. Like, whatever.
I have a theory on that, and it goes back to some people are hardwired to put the work in, and some people want the easiest path. Because what's going to be harder? Going to CrossFit every morning and eating chicken breasts and broccoli and taking vitamins and sitting in your ice tub, or watching TV and just taking a vaccine? To me, the vaccine is the easy path. And so if you want the vaccine, there's a part of me that's like, you don't want to put the work in. Now, obviously, there are people with autoimmune diseases. There are people that are like elderly people that it may make sense for. And whenever I talk about the vaccine on my show, I always preface it with, I'm not a fucking doctor. Okay. I'm a ranger and a jiu-jitsu guy. But I think at the end of the day, everybody should be able to look at their circumstance and decide what they want to put into their body and put into their children's body. And based on what we're seeing, just like you were saying, the factors that make COVID a much lower risk for you, lower percentage of body fat, higher level of physical fitness, better nutrition, I'd rather go that route. And if I go that route, I feel like I'm comfortable enough that if I do get it, and I, like everybody else, I think I've already had it, I think that I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Now, if it fucking kills me someday, guess what? Like, that's the bizarre thing about COVID is the way people are selling this stuff, they think that if you don't get COVID, you live forever. It's like Highlander, Right.
Like that's the only cause of mortality.
Yeah. Like something's going to get you. And I'm not saying, that all the people that were lost, it wasn't tragic or sad, all that stuff. I get it. But to allow it to just ruin our society, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. It's
one of the biggest statistics that blows my mind is the average age of COVID death in America is actually older than the average life expectancy.
Right. Try
and wrap your head around that.
No, I mean, that's bananas. And then if you think about our children who are being negatively affected by this, in public health, you look at quality adjusted life years. Mm-hmm. How can we maximize the number of, because like we're all going to die, like
exactly
you just said. How can we maximize for the population the greatest number of quality adjusted life years? But what we did was protect all the people with the lowest bank of quality adjusted life years,
right.
the elderly, and we took away a massive amount from our young children because
in their developmental stages.
Right. It's like we just robbed Peter to pay Paul. And I'm not saying this because I want everyone's grandma to die. That's not it at all.
Of course not.
But it's just
we want to see our daughters
thrive.
Have a fulfilling childhood. Right. And not only just so they're enjoying the moment, but by living a fulfilling childhood, it's going to develop them into kind, productive adults. And I honestly think that, there's going to be case studies done that we're not going to understand the negative impacts of what we did for 2 decades.
Right.
And it's just like you said, like my papa, he's like, I might mess this up. I think he's like 78. Right. Mm-hmm. And so after my dad passed, he's actually a family friend that basically adopted me. He's like my father figure in my life now.
Cool.
My kids call him grandpa. Right. He isolated himself because of all of the stuff on the media, and then also the truth of it, because if he were to get it, it has the potential to be very dangerous, right? And then he called me one day and he goes, Greg, I realize I am preventing myself from living and doing the things that I love and seeing your kids and seeing you and Jenny. I'm preventing myself from doing those things with the sole purpose of just living longer. So I'm not living now how I want to be living with the sole purpose of just extending life, because it doesn't make any sense. He goes, so bring the kids over. I need to see them. Wow. And we've been living normal ever since, because what do you do? I mean, like you said, COVID's not going anywhere. Right. And so if you're 80 years old and you're on your last 2 years of your life, do you eat your Thanksgiving dinner through a plexiglass window just because you might die? It doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense. And living that way will age you faster. So you're not only going to die sooner, but less fulfilling life. With, it's not like a death sentence if you're 80. There's 90-year-olds who have gotten it.
Yeah.
It's the probability of having more severe illness is higher, but it's not like predetermined. You're going to die. So when was this? You said your poppy. Was this June, July?
It was probably June. Okay. I would say June, because he has a house on Lake Stevens, and that's like our summers. His family and my whole family, like all the kids are at the lake all the time. And I think he's had that house since like 72 or something, like 74, I think.
Wow. So
his summers on the lake is like
his jam.
It's their thing.
Yeah.
And so I don't think he wanted to miss that,
Good for him.
And so, but that's I'm sure the majority of people probably feel that way.
It depends where they get their media, though. That's what I've found.
The weird thing is, so I posted a video on my story. It's been a couple months ago, but they're making these cartoons, or they're pushing this narrative that watching your grandmother eat through her living room window or whatever is like an enjoyable experience. They're like, keep Granny safe and share this time with her from her front porch. And it was like this cartoon where they were all smiling and the kids are on the front porch looking through the windows. Like, nobody's going to enjoy that experience. And then this lady's like, you should probably have Thanksgiving dinner alone. Did you see that?
I saw some of the King County stuff.
I'm going to eat all the mashed potatoes because I'm going to be alone. So you'd rather not spend the time with people you love just so you can be gluttonous? What are we talking about?
It's crazy. The only people in our society, at least in the Northwest, that see through this are Russians and people from Cuba and Venezuela.
Yeah.
I was just down in Kirkland yesterday. Everyone is masked up, all the people, and there was a bunch of Russian folks on this party boat, having a good time. It was 4:00 because we had a great day yesterday, right? And no mask and no distancing. And then other boats came up, and I've noticed that because I have friends who have, that are Russian too, and they see right through that, what's going on. It's really just the people that are, Western educated and all that, who consume NPRs, their main media outlet. They're really, you walk by them without a mask on, they kind of jump out of the way, or they get really thin. That's my favorite. As if that helps.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, it's really,
but it's like you have leprosy, it's just bizarre.
Yeah.
So, this is just how ridiculous King County is. Did you see the glory hole thing?
That was my next thing. Yeah.
They're telling you how to fuck people.
Yeah.
And not only how to do it, but
detailed instructions.
The most abhorrent way that you are you really promoting just having sex through a wall with somebody?
Right.
Do you even know who's on the other side of that wall? What are we talking about here? And the worst part about that is listen, if someone had an idea that that's how they want to have sex with somebody, go do that. I don't care. But for a government entity that's being funded on taxpayer dollars, that literally means someone was sitting at their computer and their supervisor gave them a call and said, hey, we need to put a post out about COVID safety. So come up with something. They're getting paid by our money to just put out absolute trash. And everybody's okay with it.
Right. They think that, well, at least they're doing something right. I mean, at least they're trying. That's kind of what they say. They make a concession, even though it's completely ridiculous. I'm not, like you said, I mean, but there was details of like, did you see the video? It was a text message. Like, last night was fun.
Yes.
And then there was it was, but what about COVID? And they said, well, I'm going to Lowe's to get the shower curtain and I'm going to drill a hole through the shower curtain.
I mean,
it's insane.
So someone sat with some computer program, because that wasn't a real text message thread. Right. They created one and then they posted it.
And thought it was a good idea. That's the worst part about it.
And the thing is, I am not like, I lean conservative, but I'm not religious. I don't care if people are like their sexual orientation. Like, I'm pretty open to all that stuff. Like, and if you want to fuck through a shower curtain, by all means, if that's your thing. But to think that should be promoted on a government entity's social media, it's like we're in fucking wacko land or something.
It's insane. I mean, it's just the tunnel vision. It's just so myopic. I remember, when you're studying for the SAT and stuff in high school, the word myopic, I mean, it's like as though this is the only public health issue that we've ever faced. All of a sudden, this respiratory virus, this is it. Like, we're going to forget obesity, heart disease, cancer, sexually transmitted diseases. It's like, we're focusing on this, because I was reading that, like, okay, there was no mention of safe sex, condoms, testing, for sexual STDs.
Yeah, it was just fuck through holes in the wall.
Yeah, that was it. I'm like, wow, okay, AIDS kills a lot of people.
Yeah.
Hepatitis kills a lot of people, but there's no So it's weird to me, the tunnel vision.
It's just because it's just one focus.
Right.
That's it. I feel like between COVID and the riots that they promoted, like, our country spiraled out of control for a year, but the manner in which the public was influenced was nefarious.
Totally.
You can't say it wasn't.
And the media was complicit.
Yes.
In that, 100%.
And big tech is complicit.
Yeah. Which sucks. And then so that they're affecting all of us. Like, the ability to access information that we share is being affected based upon the political viewpoints of the people that own those companies.
Yeah.
And that's, look, if I own a tech company, I wouldn't care if I don't agree with socialism. But like you said, I like to know what Bernie Sanders is saying or different people are saying. I think we should all have an open mind, and we can learn more from the opposite than we can just learning from the people that support our viewpoints.
Well, you have to think, if you're censoring something, it's probably because you're afraid of it. They weren't censoring the president or censoring like conservative voices because they thought they were going to spread a dangerous message. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not the case. They're censoring that because they don't want anybody to hear that and be like, yeah, that does make sense, doesn't it? And so censorship at any level, it's done because you're afraid of me getting the whole picture. You want to spoon feed me your ideas, and then you don't want me to get the other idea and then allow me to make a choice based on being a free thinking person. So they want to feed you their idea, hide the other one, and just hope everybody falls in line, It's happened and happening. So
keeps going. I mean, the director of the Evidence-Based Medicine Institute in the UK, he did this Danish face mask study. Did you hear about that one in November? Where they randomized two different groups that had one group wear a face covering, one group not. This was like, because there was no mandatory face mask mandate in that country, they looked at the rate of infectivity of the people. They tested them before and after. It was like 53 people got infected who didn't wear the facial covering, 47 or 48 who did. So there wasn't, from a statistical significance standpoint, not a big difference. Anyway, so the author of that study couldn't find a journal to put that in. And then when he finally found a journal, I think it was PLOS ONE or something like that, Twitter, their fact checkers said this has been flagged for false information. He's like, dude, I'm the director of this Evidence-Based Medicine Institute, and this was my study, and they still fact checked him and all that. It was crazy.
And guess what? Let me read what I want, the content that I want to read, and then I will decide if I think it holds validity or not. But there was a new study that came out related to COVID. I want to say it was yesterday, and they're already being censored because it pushes against the narrative. And it's like,
was it the one finding out the different comorbid factors that are strongly linked with severe outcomes?
Yes. Yep. That's the
yeah,
one.
that was published last week. That was really fascinating. I think it was it high 80% of deaths, or no, I'm sorry, 575,000 hospitalizations could have been prevented.
Yeah, that's the one. Yep.
Because majority of the hospitalizations were from people that had high blood pressure, cardiometabolic diseases like insulin resistance, prediabetes, or obesity.
Mm-hmm.
And those are all preventable with diet, lifestyle, exercise. And I thought it's about saving lives. Like every life matters, right? Well, it's like, why aren't gyms are still closed in California?
If people's lives mattered, there would have been a completely different approach to this. And everybody knows that. I mean, I hope everybody knows that. Like if people's lives mattered, it's like, I don't know if we were recording or not when we were talking about like, nobody has a problem with you eating yourself to death with McDonald's. Nobody cares about that. Mm-hmm. But a disease that has a 99% recovery rate, 99.9% recovery rate, it's the worst thing in the world, right? Like what is the statistics of the percentage of deaths in America that's from heart disease?
At least 600, I think close to 700,000 people every year.
I mean,
die. It's a lot.
So why wasn't that a pandemic last year?
Cancer is 500 plus thousand.
You know?
Yeah.
And just crickets on that. And it goes back to what we were saying. Like there's so many things that were shown. They don't care about our health.
So you did a 10-day fast to kick off the year.
Yes.
How'd that go?
And sorry, Mitch, if you're listening, but dude, it kind of kicked my ass to a point where it didn't feel good. Like moving forward, I'm going to do fast, probably like 36 hours or something. And I don't even really know, because a lot of people ask me like, well, what are the benefits of fasting? And I understand you go into like, it's kind of a reset. Your body goes in.
Autophagy increases.
Yeah, the autophagy, like, and it targets like the your weakest cells, correct? Mm-hmm. And so I kind of had an understanding of the reasons why I wanted to do it. And to tell you the truth, like the first 5 or 6 days, no issue. Mm. People think like not eating is crazy.
Right.
But once
fall apart.
Once you just tell yourself you're not going to eat, okay, cool, I'm not going to eat. Like obviously I felt it. I couldn't train like I normally train, but it wasn't hard until like days 7 and 8 and 9. I just felt useless. And me and my wife both did it together. We were just laying in bed like,
what are we doing?
What are we doing?
Yeah.
And she tells me to this day, she's like, I don't think I've recovered yet. I still feel a little messed up.
Really?
And it wasn't just a water fast. We were doing a couple green smoothies a day. Mm-hmm. But
super low calorie then.
Yeah, super low calorie. I won't be going.
That's a lot. I mean, because you're active, the more physically fit you are, the benefits of the fasting is amplified. It's increased. Mm-hmm. You know, so like you don't need say 7 days. You might need like 2 or 3 to get the same autophagy benefits. And so I remember you doing that. I'm like, man, 10 days. That's a lot for someone who's lean, and because you don't have a lot of body fat either.
I got more than I want, but
we all kind of do, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I did a 36-hour fast. I think what's today? Thursday. Yeah, on Monday, me and my wife did a 36-hour fast. You know, so it's like we want to start incorporating more often, but less intense. Because a 36-hour fast, you really don't even realize that you're missing food. By the time you feel hungry, you can eat again.
Exactly.
You know, one day, and it's so funny how, since we were kids, we've been plugging our guts full of food 3 times a day, and that's normal to us. So now if people don't, I missed breakfast. Oh man. And once you realize you can fast for days at a time, it's like, you don't even care.
Right.
And then the other thing that it depends on, me and my wife are always playing around with different diets because we're trying to find like the one that is the most sustainable, the one that gives the proper amount of energy, but then also one that keeps you lean, and it's a constant balance, right? And so, but we've done a lot of ketogenic work, and when you're on a keto diet and you fast, you don't miss food at all. Mm-hmm. You don't even know you're hungry. Like it doesn't even, your body doesn't register it. But if you go from eating pasta into a fast, the spikes and the drops in your blood sugar, you feel like you're dying. You're so hungry.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah, no, I know. That's
You know?
that's why I like keto for that reason. Like keto and fasting are like, as you know, Forrest Gump said, peas and carrots, man.
Yeah.
They just blend. Yeah, I'm with you.
So
100%.
yeah, if anyone is going to try a fast, I'd recommend getting in a state of ketosis first, then hitting your fast, because keto's weird. Like you don't feel hungry on keto,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. But I think, you know, for physically fit people, athletes, you know, and stuff like that, doing what you're doing more consistently, because, you know, like you said, your wife might still have some lingering effects or feel weird. I think if you look at things over the long term, that's where you get the benefit. So if you do a 36-hour fast every week, and I like a few years ago, I put out this video, Metabolic Monday. So because Mondays are busy, you know, you want to reset from the weekend. It's perfect. Just don't eat Monday. Yeah, and then you can have lunch Tuesday. Like it's pretty simple. If you look over a course of a year, that gets you into like an 18% calorie deficit without doing anything else. Right. And that's kind of that magic sweet spot. If you look at about calorie restriction for longevity, preventing cognitive decline, cancer, it's in that 20% calorie restriction. So I think that's better than doing like 1 or 2 big fasts, you know?
Yeah.
Just a consistency.
So she was reading something a couple days ago that was saying like doing 2 or 3, like a 24-hour fast a week is showing like whatever benefits, right? And so it's almost like a day or 2 days of food and then a day without a day or 2 days with food and a day without. Have you ever heard or studied anything like that?
Well, that was one of the first human studies, alternate day fasting. So basically you feed, you fast, feed, fast. And that was shown, that was at Johns Hopkins University, John Newman, I think. Well, there's another guy that was part of it, but that was in overweight people that had asthma, and it dramatically cut the need for asthma medication just by doing that. So it was like 12 weeks alternate day fasting, but then the weekends were off. So that's the other part, is like you can eat normally on the weekends, but like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
So then it's accessible for a lot of people. And I've had a lot of like doctors that I know that do that and recommend it to their clients and get amazing results.
So if you're doing that amount of fasting on the days that you're feeding, what type of, I still would imagine the type of nutrition you're feeding yourself is going to have a profound impact on the overall results, right?
I would think so.
So yeah, eating lean meats and vegetables as opposed to on my days I'm feeding at McDonald's. But what type of diet would you recommend to complement that kind of fasting?
Well, if someone's athletic, I would say definitely high protein. So like a keto carnivore style approach. Going full vegan, I think that would just not lend itself well because you're not getting enough protein. So I would do like, honestly, this time of year, like now we're getting into spring and all that, but so
we need our abs back soon.
We need our abs back, but so it's easy. I think meat, mushrooms, some avocado. That's what we eat a lot. And we have chickens. We get, eggs all the time and butter. So that might sound extreme to some people, but pretty low carb. Animal fats, as long as the animals are eating what animals should eat, grass and grazing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's my preference. Now, when spring and summer come along, in the Northwest here, we have blueberries and we have sweet potatoes. I have more carbs, but that's how I personally like to just follow. That was...
our ancestors, they had to follow that, right?
Had to eat seasonally. I think we overcomplicate nutrition and say, well, you need to have this many calories, this many carbs. It's like you look outside in the farms and where we live is very fertile. There's nothing growing. There's stuff in greenhouses and we're getting stuff imported. But I think if a lot of people just had that idea of eating what's locally, what take away refrigeration, all that, what could you have eaten? It would have been that animal, that elk, that deer that someone harvested for you or you harvested yourself.
It's fascinating.
Simple way to look at it, probably wouldn't sell a lot of books promoting that.
Well, I've heard people speak about how they're coming to the determination that there isn't a one size fits all diet because it's literally like ingrained in our DNA. Because if your ancestors for the last however many thousands of years were on the equator versus your ancestors were an Inuit Indian, what your body adapted to nutritionally is night and day.
Right.
And so, there's some test you can take, right, to see what your genetics is most
suitable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think there's something to that?
I do. I mean, now we're becoming more homogenous, and stuff like that. Like, because people are, marrying and that, which is good, but I think genetics do play a big role for sure.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you talk to some folks that are Asian Indian, they can tolerate a lot more carbohydrates. They don't sometimes do as well on a keto diet. Might experience negative issues. Say, oh man, that made my migraines worse, or this or that. So I think there's a big part of that. So yeah, there's Ancestry.com. I like this company's Strategene. So they'll look at your different genes. And so it's interesting, like people that are more near the equator, they have some different, in the enzymes that make ketones, they're variable. They're influenced by genes. Like, so people that of Saudi Arabian descent, people in Dubai and Portuguese, they don't get into ketosis as easily as say you or I might.
Okay.
Because food in those regions would mostly be, it's pretty hot, there'd be fruit and things available most of the year. So there's really no, whether you believe in evolution or natural design, whatever, intelligent design, there was really no selective pressure to select for the ability to get into ketosis. Whereas with folks of European descent, if we couldn't get into ketosis, we would die when there's, say, the Dutch famine or the whatever, So yeah, I think genetics play a big role. Now, do you have to predicate every single diet and lifestyle choice based on genes? No, but it's a consideration when things aren't working. That's just my perspective.
Now, what about, so you look at your macronutrients, your fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. It seems, I've heard people say, like, if you cut out fat and just do primarily protein and carbohydrates, you can lose weight that way. Or if you cut out carbohydrates and do fat and protein, you can lose that weight that way as well. Mm-hmm. But the worst combination is carbohydrates and fats. Is there validity to that train of thought?
I think so, but it depends on who you ask, right? So with the weight loss camp gets bifurcated into people who believe that the way that you gain weight is by calorie excess. So it doesn't matter what form of calories you eat, so long as you eat less than you are burning, so to speak. And then there's kind of hormonal camp, which I fall into. Like you said, when you hormonally have, and just from your immune system and inflammation, if you or I go, and if we think about all the bad foods, you get a donut, you have highly refined carbs mixed with liquid fat, fried donut, French fries, pizza, refined flour with fat, right? So all of the fattening foods, cookies, same thing. So you have fat and carbs mixed together. Now, if you kind of think about it in nature, you're like, okay, let's go get fat on a hunting trip. All right, what are you you're not going to have these highly processed carbs and fats together. Like you just don't really find that in nature. So I think that's where humans make mistakes is just like you said. But again, now you take all that and people can conceptually understand that. You take someone like a young athlete, someone who's doing jujitsu 4 hours a day. They can pretty much eat most of what they want and still not gain fat because they're exercising so much. So I think people that are metabolically flexible, like an athlete who's training, who's insulin sensitive, they're having a lot of demand, has a lot more leeway compared to someone who's sedentary. But by and large, and if you look at the mixed meal feeding studies, there's been studies where people go to McDonald's, they get an Egg McMuffin sandwich with like a milkshake, post-meal inflammation through the roof. All the genes responsible for making inflammatory cytokines go through the roof. Whereas you don't see that if you just have those same macros in isolation.
Got it.
So yeah, I think you're on.
So it's not calories in versus calories out. And I've believed that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so my degree, I went to college and got a degree in sports and exercise science.
Nice.
And I don't feel like I learned very much, but I remember I was in a nutrition class and they were still teaching body composition is a simple mathematical formula. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to the teacher because this was in like I said, like 2006, I think. And I tried this Atkins diet.
Oh yeah.
And where I ate 0 carbohydrates for a really long time. But I got those Atkins like chocolate protein bars. I was eating as much of those as I wanted. Every time I was hungry, I'd eat. I mean, those
were good, man.
I still have boxes of those.
Yeah.
Like stored up in it was in my parents' shop from like, because I bought them on eBay at like bulk, right?
Wow.
And I was eating 0 carbohydrates, but I was not monitoring caloric intake whatsoever. And I got ripped.
Wow.
Like the shreddedest, is that a word? The most shredded I'd ever been.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I remember telling her, I was like, listen, based on what I have been doing over the last couple months, I think there's more going on than just a simple mathematical formula. And she was like this old lady at the time, so she was dead set in her ways. She goes, no, because you're eating the way you're eating, you might not be realizing it, but you're calorically restricting yourself and you're eating less because you're not allowing yourself to have carbohydrates. I remember thinking there might be an element of that's true, but when in the fuck did we decide that your body metabolizes these different compounds exactly the same?
Right.
Like, why would it? Of course it wouldn't, you know?
Doesn't make any sense. And what is a calorie anyway? If you think about, if you were to like break down your metabolic tissues that are responsible for metabolizing these things, your liver doesn't say, oh, that is 1 calorie. Like it says, these are grams. This is protein, fat, carbs, and all that, right? So it speaks in terms of those physical elements, not biological elements, not so much this arbitrary unit of energy. I mean, that's where we've created that, right? And I honestly think, and people might think I'm a conspiracy theorist for saying this, but it's the food system, big food wants us to believe in calories, right? Because then we can get the yogurts, the cookies, and the crackers and say, well, that is sugar, but it's low calorie. So therefore it's acceptable for me. And if you look at the sports and nutrition, fields, if you look at the dietetics field, if you look at strength and conditioning, they're sponsored by Gatorade, Kellogg, Coke. And so they have a vested interest.
They're just sponsored by high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, dude. They don't want us to like nitpick and say, well, this has sugar or this has maltodextrin or dextrose. They want us focused on that calorie because then they can construct these foods with crappy carbohydrates because they're cheap, make high profit, all that. So I think there is industry influence in understanding that. But that being said, energy balance certainly matters. But there's people that have gone, a few folks that I know that have gone on a really high calorie keto diet. They lift weights and they don't gain fat. So, but then there's that's anecdotal. There's also anecdotal stories of these PhD scientists. One at University of Kansas, I think it was, he ate nothing but junk food and he didn't gain weight. So none of these are published or peer reviewed. Yeah. But he was in a calorie deficit, but he ate Twix bars, Reese's, peanut butter cup. It was junk for like 6 weeks. And he said he didn't gain any weight. He lost weight. So
he's starving himself while putting bullshit in his system, basically. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't impress me.
No, I mean, long term.
Yeah.
It's not good.
The weird thing is like how out of touch, because like I may not have a good grasp on this stuff, but I at least have an understanding. And then also I've done a lot of experiments with my own body and feel like I have a pretty good understanding of what works well for me and what doesn't. I'm still trying to fine tune that and get that better. But like, I remember I was in the lunchroom one day with a police officer at my department who's morbidly obese, right? And I was eating guacamole and he's like, oh, that looks good, but there's way too much fat in that for me. And I didn't decide to berate him, but it's like people still think
that's bad.
That fat is bad for you while being obese, and he was drinking a soda.
Sugar free or straight up?
I wish I could remember.
Yeah.
But still, regardless.
Right. You're like, dude, the hypocrisy in thinking.
Exactly. Just the lack of knowledge, and things still say low fat on them as a selling point to foods that you don't want to be low fat.
Right. The perception is there. I mean, it kind of goes back to the whole pandemic thing because these industries would hire experts to say their product was either safe or benign, right? The cigarette industry used this. There's a great book. It's under there. I'll have to, Triumph of Doubt is what it's called, this public health researcher. Anyway, so the sugar industry did this. They hired experts to say, see, sugar's not that bad. And what they would do is pay the experts to design these studies in animals or whatever, to say that the thing that they're selling is inert or benign. There's no harm to it. They did it with cigarettes. They did it with silica that's in concrete and stuff like that. And people that are using like cement board all the time or drywall, you inhale this dust and it's really carcinogenic. Like silica is not a carcinogen, but when it's in a dust form and you and I inhale it, if we do that repetitively, it's linked with cancer. Anyway, but it's funny that we're kind of doing this with COVID, where the experts are saying people are dangerous, like you must wear a mask. But if you actually look at the human studies on masking, I know we're going to get crap for saying this, but the data is actually not really that good in non-healthcare settings. Like in healthcare settings where people are gowning up prior to seeing patients and not putting their face mask in their phone, in their pocket and all this crap, right? The data shows that facial coverings reduce infections. But when you take out that element of strict usage, then the data is kind of not all that good for public masking. Anyway.
Well, I mean, not to go too far down the mask tangent, but again, I think a lot of the mask stuff is just virtue signaling more than concerned about somebody's safety.
Right.
For example, and I'm not going to say his name or his hospital, but my best friend is a doctor and he's an ER physician. And he got hired by a new hospital so he had his mask on and they said, you need to have a face shield on too. And he goes, the face shield, the glare in it makes it hard for me if I'm like suturing or if I'm inspecting like an injury or a wound. He's like, it actually makes it hard for me to do my job. And this is what his chain of command told him. We don't care if it's up or down. It just has to be on your head because that is the determined required PPE. Like, what are we doing here?
Man, it's crazy.
But yeah, I mean, people have been,
we've been duped.
Trying to be telling us, people have been trying to say that cigarettes were good for us at some point.
Right.
I mean, and that sugar is good for us. I mean, what was it in the 70s when they decided to pull all the fat out of foods and replace it with high fructose corn syrup?
Right.
Like, shocking that had
a negative effect.
Impact
on
on
obesity correlates with all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, again, sorry to create the mass tangent, but I think it's healthy to question everything, right?
Yeah.
Just because some expert says this, well, who's paying this expert to say what they're saying, or like who's padding their research or whatever? So,
I love that you said that as it applies to the medical field, because that's something that I would say in law enforcement too, is like, if you just blindly support something because it's a law, like, well, just because something's legislated and it's on our books, that doesn't mean that it's morally or ethically correct. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when it was against the law for a person of color to drink out of a white person's drinking fountain. You know what I mean?
Right.
So don't say like, well, it's law, because you need to be thinking bigger picture than that.
Yeah.
That's
a great point.
It's the same thing like what you're saying in the medical field. It's the exact same point.
Right. Yeah. It could be that some arbitrary law, that didn't have
a group of men created that have flaws just like every group of men.
Right.
And then it was legislated into existence,
But that critical thinking is lost, I think, in our school system. Where do you think it goes sideways?
It has to be the school system to a certain point, and that's, again, like, and I didn't hate public school before COVID. That's why my kids were in public school. But once I transitioned them to private school, now I'm seeing the difference. And it's like my 5-year-old is coming home reading and doing math. And it's not because she's a super genius. It's because they're taking a different approach. And it's really interesting to see. That's awesome. But I'm hoping that this school does take a different approach to, like, I mean, a big part of being a human being is how you interact with people. Totally. It is how you perceive situations and how you problem solve and that kind of stuff. And like, yes, that's our responsibility as parents, but they have your kids for 6 hours a day.
Right. That's
a substantial amount of influence.
Totally.
Yeah. So I think all that's important, but I don't know. I can't speak to it much just because I don't have like data or I haven't studied it, but you can't look at the public school system and say that they're not promoting a certain agenda over another.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
it's the same thing like we were talking about with the law enforcement agencies, at least in this region. They're kind of bending a knee to these radical ideologies because people don't want to push back.
Right.
And I'm seeing a little bit of that with the public school.
Yeah.
Like my daughter came home, my oldest, and she's still in public school. My 11-year-old wanted to stay. And then I pulled my 5 and my 9-year-old because they're too young. You know, my 11-year-old is in like all AP classes and she's getting straight A's. And so I was like, I'm going to give her the power of choice here.
Yeah.
But she's like, everybody hates Trump at school. And everybody thinks like everybody's a racist and everybody's homophobic and all these things that 11-year-olds shouldn't even be thinking about.
Right.
And I've talked about it on my show several times that she came home one day and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be a lesbian or not when I grow up. And I'm like, where's this coming from? She's like, well, that's what the other girls at school are saying. And I'm like, so you have a group of girls that think that they want to be lesbians when they get older. And she goes, yeah. And it's just frustrating to me because I told her, I was like, I don't care.
Right.
If you're a lesbian or if you're straight when you grow up, I don't care. But for you to already have the weight of thinking that you have to decide that at 11, like, what are we talking about?
That's insane.
And I said to her, I said, when you get to the point when you fall in love with another person and you want to create a life with that person, you'll know if you're straight or not. Like, that's not going to be something that you decide. That's going to be something that you feel. So for you to think that you have to like confront that issue right now is bullshit. So stop it, you know?
I agree.
And I mean, that was a result of a public school conversation. So who knows, you know?
And then to empower children of that age to, just change your genitalia, change your sex, the whole transgender thing.
Dude,
I mean,
don't
that's
get
just
me started. We could go a whole nother hour on that.
It's insane to me.
I mean, did you see Senator Rand Paul?
Yeah, that was really good.
It was good.
Just deflecting the question.
Yeah. And he's like, listen, I mean, hey, I was a practicing physician. If I sutured a child that fell down the stairs, parental consent, just to do that.
Right.
A simple procedure, right? And now there's people in positions of power that legitimately think you should be able to pump testosterone and mutilate someone's genitals because they want to at 6 years old. And they're finding that the majority of people that go through gender reassignment at a young age regretted it at some point.
No way.
Yeah. Who would have thought, dude, you know? Yeah. And again, like we talked about, I mean, people think people on the right were painted as like these bigots and these racists and these homophobes. It's like, if you want to cut your dick off and become a transgender lesbian or whatever the fuck you want to do, right. I don't know anyone that cares.
Right.
I don't. But to think that a child should be doing that to themselves, like you can't even buy Copenhagen.
Right.
You can't even put tobacco in your mouth, but you can reassign your gender. The other thing that's frustrating, my listeners are probably like, oh God, he's going on this tangent again. But since we're putting out this podcast on both our platforms, since we both host a show, is that, like you said, you've done testosterone before. I've used testosterone before.
Yeah.
And if people hear that, a lot of people look at you sideways like, oh, what?
Yeah.
You put extra testosterone in you? That's cheating.
Right.
That's so bad for your health. That's this, that's that. But if you put it in an 11-year-old girl, it's all good.
I know.
You know what I mean?
It's insane.
Same shit.
The concessions.
Is it good or is it bad? What is it? Because you tell me, like, is it good or is it bad?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, it's nuanced and it has certain applications. And okay, so maybe you shouldn't just be fucking pumping it into children and changing their, I mean, if a full-grown man that's our age uses testosterone improperly, we can fuck our hormones up for the rest of our life.
Right.
Your ability to produce your own hormones can get shut down. And okay, so what do you think it's going to do to a child that's prepubescent? Like, come on, dude.
It's, the regrets. I mean, it's just insane to me. And then the brain's not developed. I mean, this is a very serious consideration for life, for disease risk, for everything. Procreation. I mean, give me a break.
Well, and I don't know if this is like conspiracy theorists or not, but they said that like a lot of gender reassignments prevent procreation. Is that accurate?
I mean, how could
You would think that, I mean, on its surface, it seems kind of obvious.
Yeah.
But I don't understand that world at all. So for me to speak to it, but there is some people that are like,
it's
just
intentional.
It's another,
Depopulation.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
I mean, who knows?
You know,
I don't know how nefarious our government is or not. Like I go back and forth, even in my own mind, like our government is run by very, very nefarious, corrupt people. And then I go to the other side of the fence and go, no, they're just idiots. They work their way to the top.
Yeah.
And I'm giving them too much credit.
Right.
By thinking that this is a master plan, it's giving these people too much credit. Because who do you know? Like a lot of my friends are super intelligent, successful people. None of them want to go into politics.
No. Right.
So, you know, so is it just like, it's the pool that they're drawing from? These are the people that work their way to the top.
It's a good point.
And it's hard. I don't know what it is, but I go back and forth on it. And this isn't even a right versus left issue, but to think that like Biden is the most qualified person to be leader of the free world, you only have to hear him talk for a few minutes and you're like, wait a minute. Like if I was a Democrat, I would have been in Tulsi Gabbard's corner from the get-go.
Right.
She's articulate. She's honest. She's
awesome.
She brings a lot, and she brings like a lot of bipartisanship to politics because she's willing to talk across the aisle. Like did you listen to her on Rogan?
I did, yeah.
So she's like, she goes, there's other Democrats in Congress that are mad at me because my workout partner is a Republican. She's like, the Congress has its own gym, and she goes and works out with a Republican before session, and people are mad about it. It's literally like high school drama at the highest levels.
It's insane.
And so it's like, you hear stuff like that, and it's like, I don't have hope for American politics.
I know, right? It's like, where is it going to end? I don't know, brother. It's crazy.
So can we take it back to the metabolic side
let's
for
go.
a minute?
Yeah.
So, and again, like this is kind of cool because we both host a show and we're going to release it on both platforms. So, and you're a metabolic and like nutrition expert and specialist, and I'm just some cop that made a video, but we get to bounce ideas back and forth. And some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is, for one, is like, like the ice bath, the sauna, contrast therapy. Like, I don't know if you saw the video yesterday of my 5-year-old getting in our ice tub.
That's awesome.
I'll show you afterwards. Okay. But I geek out on that, and I've listened to like Rhonda Patrick stuff. She's too intelligent for my brain to comprehend, though.
Yeah.
Like her vocabulary supersedes my comprehension. But you know, like what does it create? The neuroepinephrine response, brown adipose tissue, like, which is basically giving you like denser amounts of mitochondria in your fat cells, right?
Right.
And you see like these benefits, and then you feel it immediately once you start doing it. And so I've had people reach out to me and be like, you know, the science is all bullshit on that. It's not good for you. And so my response now is, I don't care if it's good for me or not, scientifically, it makes me feel good.
Totally.
So I'm going to do it for that alone.
Right.
But how would you defend that or promote that from a scientific standpoint?
Yeah. I mean, the science on cold thermogenesis is phenomenal. There's a lot of research from folks in Canada, and basically what they show is it affects the immune system in a favorable manner. It causes the mitochondria, the energy producing powerhouses within your fat cells to enrich. So it causes this beiging. So you've heard of, like, people say brown fat. Well, brown fat is brown because of the mitochondria. Just like muscle meat that you get from the grocery store is red, you know, from hemoglobin and mitochondria, because our muscles are enriched in mitochondria. So you cause these adaptations. So it's a good stress. Just like we talked about, you know, when we started this conversation, is, you know, when you're serving in a foreign country and there's war going on, like, that stress, like in periodic bursts, are good, just like exercises, for example. So periodic cold is something that humans were exposed to, like since humanity has existed.
Yeah.
And we are so far removed from that, unfortunately, now, because life is so easy. Who wants to get cold, right? We want, we have smartphones, smart houses, it's always 72 degrees, or we have the AC in the summer.
Constant comfort.
This it's called thermal neutral zones, is actually linked with obesity and all that. So I think it's a good, and it's just a great way to introduce grit and hardship into your life. And I was telling you kind of offline, like my morning routine, I love coffee, but I do meditation, I do breath work. And then before I allow myself to have coffee, I have to take a cold shower. I have to do all those things. So I just because it's so easy to push it off. Oh, I'll start cold showers tomorrow. Yeah. I'll meditate tomorrow. I'll exercise tomorrow.
I'm terrible at that too.
So I just create these little games in your head. Like, I really enjoy coffee. That's what I want. Or I really want to get on Instagram and screw around and waste time. But I can't do any of that crap until I do these things that I know are going to set my day up for success. And so if people are wondering well, how long do you do a cold shower? How long do you do the plunge? It's just do whatever you can. I think like Tony Robbins and these different people, just a quick in and out is good enough, just for, like you said, you feel better. Like, I hate getting in the cold shower. I love it how I feel afterwards. Like your future self will love you for it.
So do you just listen to your body and stay in as long as whatever feels right?
Yeah. And you build up that adaptation, which is cool. Like, I'm a little cold. Are you cold now?
I haven't really noticed.
So I've been cold. So I haven't eaten yet today, but so you do the cold shower and you might be a little bit more cold, but
I took a cold shower this morning though.
Oh, you did too? Yeah. Cool.
So I used to give myself times, and then I used to try and build those times.
Yeah.
And dude, it got to the point where I stayed in my ice tub for 22 minutes one day.
That's savage. Wow.
But it wasn't good for me because my fingers were tingling and my thumb was numb for months afterwards.
Ooh.
And so I realized dude, you're trying to be hard, but you're actually being stupid. We always used to say in the Rangers, there's a fine line between hard and stupid.
Yeah.
And I crossed over to the line of stupid.
Right.
And now even if I go in the mountains or something and get real cold, I feel it in my thumb. And so I think I might have done permanent nerve damage just from trying to be hard, right? But me being me, I got in there and I put tons of Epsom salt in it. So the water temperature is 30 degrees. It can drop below what most people think is freezing because of the density of the salt.
Right.
And I got in there and I said, I'm going to do 10 minutes. And so I don't like to watch the clock, So I didn't look at my watch, sat there, did some Wim Hof breathing and whatnot. And the first time I checked my watch, I'm I think it's probably 10 minutes. And I looked and I was at 12:30.
Wow.
And I was oh, I can do 15.
Yeah.
Same thing, but I'm not going to look. Okay. It's probably around 15. I look at 17. And I just kept doing that to myself. I can stay to 20. And then I looked and it's 22. And I was I actually feel warm and comfortable in here. It's it's time to get out. That's called dying. It's hypothermia probably starting to set in.
Interesting.
And so I got out and then I realized, you actually messed yourself up a little bit by just being hard-headed. And so now I don't put times on my watch. I just, whatever I'm comfortable with.
I think that's a great way. It's just when you said you fasted 10 days, it might've been too much.
Yeah.
So we listen to our bodies, and that, you kind of said at day 7, it felt uncomfortable. Well, just like I don't like to put parameters on. And it's funny, in America, right? We want freedom and all this, but then a lot of people ask, well, give me the parameters on how long I should sauna. How long should I do the cold shower? I think listen to your body.
Yeah.
But I do recommend people do cold before hot, because a lot of people say, well, I'll do the hot shower, then I'll finish off with cold. It's so easy to wimp out,
Yeah.
So it's easier to go in cold and then or take 2 showers, because the cold one's quick. It's just a wake me up. You're not hanging out in there. But I noticed this morning I was in there for 30 seconds and I was all right, I'm good. I did it. So that's just what I personally do. So I don't like putting parameters either on the sauna, because there's some days where you're stressed or whatever, and you're I got to get my 20 minutes in for heat shock proteins and all that. It's dude, if you're hot, just get out. Don't.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you say that, because I've recently had the same experience with my sauna, because my number has been 30 minutes at 200 degrees. And then I'll even get stupid sometimes and be like, no water.
Oh, yeah,
like, but again, it's sometimes you're training the physical, sometimes you're training the mental.
Right.
And so the no water thing, you're training the mental. But, and I didn't have like a long lasting effect, or I didn't injure myself in any capacity, but I got out and I just felt like shit. Yeah. It's like, okay, why are you doing these things to your body if the immediate reaction is unpleasant? It made your day worse, you know? So I still try and do 30 minutes in the sauna, but if it feels like it's becoming unreasonable, I don't like, you're a pussy if you get out. Like, I was like, it's okay, you know? Totally. But what about frequency of these things? Is it something that you would recommend on a daily basis then?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure if you took a weekend off or something like that,
yeah.
But you'll notice, like, so I actually got COVID in December.
Okay.
And it was kind of, and my first indicator that I had, I thought I had a cold, by the way. But I couldn't take the cold shower. So I was doing this and I was like, dude, I'm just so intolerant to cold. So I knew immediately, and that's what's cool about having these biofeedback mechanisms where there's cold shower, breathing, sauna, is you get to know your body. And then when something goes off, because we can have cancer brewing, you don't know about it until maybe you get a diagnostic test 10 years down the line. But if all of a sudden you can't breathe well, or you can't do your cold showers, then you can start to do blood work and stuff. So I think there's all these added value in addition to making you feel better.
That's interesting.
So anyway, I couldn't do my cold showers when I had COVID. And that was my first indicator that, like, dude, something is wrong. And so I took like about 2 weeks off because my body temperature was off for a little bit. I didn't get a cough or anything like that. And then I resumed, and it took me about 3 days to get back in the habit. But I think it's just like with exercise, right? If you do one marathon a year, you're not gonna be very aerobically fit in comparison to if you ran a mile every day.
Yeah.
So I think consistency trumps all, but make it just part of your routine. These because these are different. The more that we can just make this automatic.
Yeah.
In the morning, I get up, I do X and Y, I take my cold shower, have coffee, boom. Like if it's automatic, then you don't have willpower saying, okay, you haven't done your cold shower yet. It's 11 o'clock at night. You're not going to do it. So I like to create with healthy things, just make them just streamlined,
Yeah.
Make it a habit.
No, that makes the most sense. And then just get, like you said, get out of the way.
Get out of the way.
Kind of develop like a reward system for yourself.
Totally.
Man, I like that.
It's a good, because, habits, I love studying habits, because like they either totally serve us or they screw us up, right? If you have a habit of, I used to get up and just look at Instagram in bed. And I'm like, dude, I was wasting like 20, 30 minutes every day.
Yeah.
Stressed out. Now it's like the phone doesn't even go in my room.
Really?
Yeah.
I've told myself that I need to do that.
Yeah.
And I've yet to implement it. Because I actually set a time limit on Instagram, but then it'll pop up, your time limit's been reached, and then you can just click ignore.
Right. And you're like, I'm only going to do 5 more minutes, and it's an hour,
It's nuts,
whatever.
Man.
So yeah, just those little things. And then now it's like, if I bring the phone in the room or whatever, when I deviate from those habits, I feel like crap. And then I create that like, dude, you're such a wuss. You didn't go in the shower this morning. You didn't do your breath work. Like, what the hell? So it's cool because it becomes like automated. You become a little machine.
Yeah. And it's weird how, I've heard different trains of thought on how long something becomes a habit. But I wonder how long it is before it like is deprogrammed as a habit once you stop doing it. Cause like this is just recently too, probably the last month, I have not been working out nearly as much. I kind of tweaked my knee and I think I just kind of use that as an excuse. And I haven't been doing outside of like a few rounds of jiu-jitsu. I haven't been hitting it hard. And I usually like love kettlebells and CrossFit, and I have an assault bike in my bedroom.
Nice.
And running, like all this stuff, I'm usually very active and I'm just out of the habit. And I sit in my bed, I'll wake up and I'll be like, the thought of like going on a run is just, I'm not, and I don't do it. And I've been like I said, it's been like a month now.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, you better
get going,
get those habits back into place because before you know it, a month turns into 6 months. And I feel like, and I don't know if I'm just too hard on myself, but I feel like I lose my fitness 10 times faster than I gain it.
Same.
you know? So I feel like I can get really, really fit, but it takes so much work. And then if I veer off the path, even for a moment, I'm back to just day one, you know?
I'm totally with you, man. I've been building the sauna, and that's been my exercise, because sometimes I'll usually do it in the evenings after work, and that's when I normally work out. And I'm like, but I'm with you, because your body gets used to that intensity. Then when you break away from it, then when you restart, you're like, oh, dude, this kind of sucks again.
Yeah.
So,
and I just think I joke that I have bad genetics, because like there's guys I was in the Army with wouldn't work out.
Wow.
But when it was like a physical fitness test, just smash everybody.
Wow.
And dudes that would just sit around and drink alcohol nonstop and just stay 5% body fat and be able to run an 11-minute 2-mile and just freak shows, you know?
That's crazy, man.
And it's like, I could always get in good shape,
but
I had to be putting the miles and the time in. Whereas
it sounds weird, but I think that's a better place to come from.
Yeah, I agree, because
you have to work at it. You know, it creates more character.
Yeah. And like just like we're discussing, it becomes a habit, because sooner or later it's going to catch up with those guys just sitting around drinking alcohol.
Yeah. The genetics.
You got away with it while you're in your 20s and your 30s maybe, but we'll see how that works into your 40s and 50s.
Long term. Yeah. I mean, look at some of the like amazing quarterbacks of all time, right? They were moderate high school players, right? But that they weren't the best. You know, in some of these different, I'm thinking like Vince Young and some of these other people that have been studied in the book Grit. Have you read that?
I've
Angela?
not.
Dude, amazing book.
All right.
Anyone listening, check it out. And she talks about, you know, having grit is better than talent. You know, so that grit of, oh man, I don't have the best genetics. Me neither. But it causes you to just work, and you can outwork.
And you'll hear like coaches, especially in like fighters, will say that a lot. The guys that come in the gym with the most natural talent are very unlikely the best fighters in the gym, because it's the guys that are below them that don't have that God-gifted ability that have to work and work and work and work. And it's easier for that person, once they achieve a certain level, to like hold it in a higher regard than to someone that can just turn it off the couch.
Yeah.
I mean, John Jones is open about it. He's like, there's been camps where I didn't even train for. He's like, the night before I knocked out DC, I was out partying and I was drunk, you know? Wow. It's like, this might not apply to him because he's probably the greatest of all time. But like, you got guys, like, we're not all equal, I guess I should say.
Right.
And I know that's like a bad thing to say, but
it's just the
it's
truth.
just reality of being a human being.
Totally.
You know? Another thing I wanted to ask you about was breath work, but more specifically. So I read Patrick McEwen's book, The Oxygen Advantage, and then James Nestor's Breath.
Yeah. Great books.
And yeah, both those books I feel like changed my life.
Yeah.
And I had my nose was broken a lot of times, and I had deviated septum surgery. And I still felt like I couldn't breathe through my nose. And so after reading those books, I started trying to kind of force breathing through my nose.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where my nose worked again.
Wow.
And I was like, I wonder if I even needed the surgery to start with.
Yeah.
You know, because after the surgery, initially it worked for a little bit, and then it went back to not working. And the doctor's like, your turbinates are too big, so we'll have to do a second surgery. I'm like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And then I was reading you were a proponent of taping your mouth, and I was like, okay, Mike's all dialed in on the breath stuff too. So what would you say about that? Just people that are unfamiliar with it.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think the power of the ability, like your nose is a muscle, just like anything else. I mean, there's, you know, as James Nestor talks about in his book, there's as much erectile tissue in your nose as, you know, clitoris and penis and things like that. Like it's meant to be activated and stimulated via breath, right? So there's hope, and that's cool. How long did it take you to start to be able to breathe with intention?
Fast.
Couple weeks?
Yeah,
wow.
A couple weeks.
Awesome.
But here again, like just like I was saying, there's always an ebb and flow, and I'm ebbing right now with my fitness, and the same thing with my breath work. And now I'm waking up with a dry mouth again. Yeah, and I was like, I need to start taping my mouth.
Totally.
You know.
Well, I think starting out, you know, for people that haven't heard, you should be breathing through your nose, especially when you're sleeping. And people like Patrick McEwen and James will say even during exercise. And if you can't properly breathe through your nose during exercise, maybe your intensity is, you need to ramp up your intensity a little bit more and scale that so that you can match that. And I think it's hard. Like when I'm exercising intensely, 100% nasal breathing is challenging.
It is hard. I'll do exercise. I would do workouts on my assault bike where it's only nasal breathing. And I perform
not as good.
Drastically less than I do if I can breathe through my mouth.
Yeah.
But I was also wondering if that's a transition period. Because remember, in one of those books, he talked about studying cyclists. And he said they performed at a higher level once they became conditioned to nasal only breathing.
Right. Yeah, because there's more oxygenation. It's moister, the air coming in and all of that. There's more nitric oxide.
Which is a vasodilator, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
But it's like, it's getting used to it. Maybe consider it like unilateral training, for example, will help you become stronger. But at first it sucks, So nasal breathing is kind of like, one step forward, two steps back, so to speak. So it's going to take time. But and that's one of the things that are people that are brand new to it. I suggest mouth taping during the day for that reason. Go on a walk, tape your mouth. And then before...
Don't worry about all the sideways looks you're getting.
People be like, oh, that's a new cool face mask.
What if they say hello to you?
Dude, people don't even talk to each other anymore, man.
Know,
Come on,
right?
Let's be real. At least on the West Coast, maybe in Texas. But yeah, so mouth taping during the day I think is good. Just even if you're sitting there at your desk, you can try it, because then when you go to lie down in bed, the first, like you probably remember the first night.
It's like you're gonna. I was like, I hope I wake up in the morning.
You have anxiety, and that's not a good thought before bed. But it really enhances your sleep, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And waking up. It's funny. The first person that told me I needed to get my deviated septum fix. Who do you think it was?
Dude, I don't know.
My dentist.
Really? Oh, okay. Yeah.
He goes, your gums. He goes, I can tell you're a mouth breather, and it's starting to affect the health of your gums. And he goes, you have to be breathing through your nose at night. And so I was like, my nose doesn't work. I haven't breathed through my nose in a decade. And that was the first, got the wheels turning. And so, and I'm a big wuss when it comes to surgery. Like the lack of control you have at that moment is something that doesn't sit well with me. Right. And I remember like getting wheeled into this freezing room, and it looked like the scene of Braveheart where they disemboweled William Wallace. There's like all these medieval tools sitting next to me. And I'm just like, oh no. Yeah. I know what's about to happen. And, it's just something that doesn't sit well with me, but I went through it. And like I said, I don't know if it made much of a difference until I started changing the way that I breathed.
Right.
That's
probably going to make the biggest difference. But obviously if you have a structural issue, it's going to cause a functional decline. But I think a lot of people, they just like people identify with their disease. I have chronic fatigue. I have depression. So then they manifest it. So if people have a deviated septum or this, they say, I cannot breathe through my nose. So then they just brush it out. They're not even going to try. But here, you tried and you made it better with time, with practice, with intention. So I think it's worthwhile for everyone to do that. We have our noses for a reason, to be able to breathe. And we're not taught this stuff. I mean, I was a mouth breather forever. And I remember Mark Brahena, a dentist friend of mine in 2015 said, I thought he was joking about mouth taping, because I was like, dude, give me a break. Like, and the way that he said it was sort of sarcastic. And then he was like, no, for real. This is amazing for sleep. And that day was like, it changed my life. I woke up that next morning, vivid dream recall. I was like, what have I been doing for my whole life? And, you used to get tired at 2:00 or 3:00, need a coffee. That never happens to me anymore. So if folks have facial hair, you just got to trim around. Men got to be a little bit more creative. Yeah. There's the Somnifix. They're the little strips that are shaped like your mouth. I personally like the 3M micropore tape. Okay. That's great, but super, like in terms of low hanging fruit to improve your quality of life, one of the simplest things you could do. Yeah.
So, all right, I'm gonna tape my mouth tonight.
Get it, man. I have some tape for you if you want.
Really?
Some
I'll definitely.
I'll give you some.
I mean, I don't have like much facial hair, but I was using like Gorilla tape.
Yeah. Use what you have, right?
And then the next morning is like, all right, here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
Not necessarily what you want to wake up to.
Right.
But
I've used that in a pinch, duct tape, Band-Aids when I travel sometimes, because it literally makes that much of a difference. You become, again, it's like this like we're talking about cold showers.
yeah.
Now it's like, dude, I freak out. Like maybe it's weird, but I can't sleep without it. Or I know I'm going to wake up with a dry mouth.
Yeah. So
feeling
it's
like crap.
it becomes a priority based on how you know you're going to feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those books were fascinating, talking about how like there's certain cultures where the kids get in trouble.
Right.
If they breathe through their mouth.
Yeah.
So the moms will pinch them.
And slap them and stuff. Isn't that nuts? Dude.
And then in our culture, it's like, it's not even something people consider.
No.
You know, I mean, other than the term mouth breather is derogatory. So I don't know where that came from.
Right.
But if you call someone a mouth breather, like,
It's a negative. Yeah.
so
Yeah. It's
man, we talked about a lot of stuff.
We did.
And we covered everything that was on
You had
my
it written
notes.
down? Awesome,
I guess
dude.
the last thing that, and we've touched on it off and on, but the most fascinating thing about your Instagram is that you're constantly reminding people that you're in charge of your health and that you're responsible for it. And these are the things that you can do. And for whatever reason, I feel like everybody, it's like they almost want to put the responsibility of their health off on somebody else.
It's weird.
And be it, I mean, for instance, gastric bypass surgery. I don't know if you ever watched my 600-pound life, because it adds no value to your life. But for whatever reason, that's one of my wife's vices. And I'll lay in bed and she'll turn that on, and it's like a train wreck because you can't look away.
Right.
And you got these people that are willing to literally have their organs cut out of their body so they can have a healthier body composition, when the solution is right in front of your face. But people want to they want to put the responsibility of their health off on other people and just hope that they give them a magic fix. And that's what we're just seeing, that to a different degree with the COVID thing. And all of your stuff is fascinating because it's a constant reminder, and you have like 100,000 followers. So you're reaching a lot of people, and it's like, no, these are the things that you can do.
Right.
These are the things that people aren't talking about. And I don't know what it's going to take before people realize it's like, you're in charge of your health.
Yeah. I think maybe it's a belief system that they don't believe they're in charge, or they think that access to healthcare is a problem. I mean, if you look at the US, I mean, we spend way more on healthcare per person than any other country in the world. So if it was an access problem, then why do we have such a bad COVID problem? Right.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is that perception, but also I think maybe it's the media, and because I think with COVID, we were taught that, like, this virus affects everyone the same. And so then we all have to do the exact same things. And so we kind of have, and that's just the mainstream, there's people that I have family members who believe that, like, well, if the doctor said this, it must be true. If they diagnosed me with this or said this drug is a solution or this supplement sucks, then they absolutely believe that, because these doctors are practicing, in very opulent, nice buildings and getting high salaries. So they sort of believe that. But I think until someone has had bad advice from a medical professional or have tried exactly what they said and didn't get the results, then they start to question things like we were talking about with sugar, with tobacco, with masking, whatever. So I think it's healthy to sort of question that. But I don't know why people pass the onus. Like, I would never take financial advice from the government. Why would I?
No.
Why would I take health? I mean, I listen. I like to see what the recommendations are and whatever, but why
they're not subject matter experts at anything. No, I'm going to steal that. Like, you don't take financial advice from an organization that's trillions of dollars in debt. So
man. And so I think, there's this perception that we all need universal health care and everything like that. But if you look at some of those countries and how they responded to the virus, they actually, hospitals in Italy and other parts in Europe where they have universal healthcare and all this were not doing so well.
Yeah, it was a shit show.
I have family members in Canada that have had cancer and things like that, and they have just terrible times with their healthcare system. So yeah. And a lot of the diseases that claim our lives or dip into that quality adjusted life pool, the neurocognitive issues, the dementia, the Alzheimer's, the cancer, the heart disease, these are all diseases. Yeah, they might have a genetic predisposition, but our environment is loading the gun. I'm sorry, that our genetics load the gun, but our environment is going to pull the trigger, right?
Yeah,
so it's like
got it.
when that trigger is pulled is contingent upon the choices that we all make right now. And I think that's where people, just like they believe in calories, they believe in this genetic predeterminism, which, my grandparents had diabetes, my dad had diabetes, so therefore I will get diabetes. Well, it's like, look at the dietary choices and the lifestyle choices that your grandparents and your parents made.
Yeah.
And make yours different. So yeah, we have a lot of impact into our life progression. And so, yeah, I tried to share that on Instagram. For some reason, it's considered by some a conspiracy theory or a right wing, whatever. But it's
you catch hate on that? I mean, it's the internet, so of course you do to a certain degree.
More so earlier, I feel like those people they've left by now.
It's kind of it's strange how at least you probably grew your audience over a period of time, right?
Yeah.
Mine went like overnight.
Nice.
I was just a normal dude with like 1,000 friends to boom. It was like 80,000 or something. Nice. It's dwindled down a little bit, but it's funny how even though 95% of people are like on board with what you're saying, the 5% of haters, it kind of gets to you at first.
Yeah.
Until you kind of learn how the game is played.
Right.
You
remember their comments more, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny how that works.
And even though I guess that's just how we're wired, right? 95% is in your favor, but the 5% is like, oh, why'd they say that?
Yeah, totally.
And I was getting crazy stuff for a while too.
Oh, I can imagine, man.
Because the people that are on the other side of the spectrum thought that I was promoting a mindset that was going to get people sick and killed, So.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy, man. But I think, the message here is, life is what we make of it, and our health is just a subset of that.
For sure.
And this idea that you're just going to walk through life eating the stuff that the government says is cool or that they subsidize and then just taking these medicines, that's not going to work that's not going to work out very well. And this idea of polypharmacy, where people are taking multiple medications, that's a risk factor for death and severe outcome with COVID. In fact, there was a study in the UK that found that people that were on the degree to they put people in different cohorts based upon how many medicines they take. The more medicines, the more likely they were to test positive for COVID.
Oh, really?
So there was it's not just like, oh, there's this association, there's this correlation. Yeah, it was
literally your body's ability to
test,
just prevent getting it, huh?
You're just weaker, probably, just less resilient.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've read that they say one of the reasons why the nasal swab is kind of a disingenuous test is because the nasal passage is a filter. And so if there's COVID inside of your nasal cavity, that doesn't mean you have it.
Right.
It very well could mean your nose did the right thing and you never actually
got symptomatic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that would make sense that there's certain things that you can do and certain lifestyle choices you can make that not only make it a higher likelihood that you're going to be healthy if you do get it, but even get it in the first place.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I think I got it because I was taking antibiotics at that time.
Oh, okay.
I stepped on a sea urchin in Hawaii and my foot, I didn't treat it very well. At first you're supposed to pee on it. Have you heard about that?
I've heard that for jellyfish. I didn't know you're supposed to do that for sea urchins too.
Yeah, anyway, so I ignored it. And then,
where in Hawaii?
We were in Maui.
Okay.
And, and it's a long complication. So anyway, I had this little infection and then we went to this tide pool and I just got wrecked by some waves. And then so I got another kind of cut on that same side of my body. It overwhelmed my immune system. And then my foot just that night that the tide pool thing happened. Anyway, so I got infected. So I had to take the antibiotics and then we were at a dinner party and I think I was weakened from that. Got it. And then I got sick, but it was just a day of muscle aches and I was a little fatigued and anyway.
And then you actually got tested?
Well, So then I went on this hunting trip, and we used to have backyard pigs, and I went to Texas with some friends, and I couldn't smell the hogs. And I have a really good pig nose because I've had them in the backyard, you know? And they're like, oh my God, can you guys smell the hogs? And I'm like,
nope.
I'm like, well, are you sure? I can't smell crap. Like, dude, they are right over there. And I'm like, there's no way. Cause I can, it's really distinct once you develop the pig nose. And then I could not. And then we had these hogs, some of them, we killed some hogs and all that. And I still couldn't smell anything. And then I knew.
Yeah, you knew.
I was like, well, that cold. And then I can't smell. I could still taste. And then I got my antibodies tested and they were positive. So,
okay. Where did you get that done at?
Evergreen. Just, through Lab Corp.
Okay. Is that something, isn't there like a timeline that your antibodies will show up? Or is that something that you should have in you indefinitely?
Yeah, I think it depends. Like everyone's a little different.
Got it.
It will be about 60 days. I wanted to go this week. I might go tomorrow. I want to track
if you still have them.
Yeah. So you want to look for IgG to SARS COV2. So, there's IgG, there's IgA, there's IgM, whatever. So you want to look for IgG antibodies, but the decay of that is different for everyone based upon how severe. Well, first of all, it's not uniform based upon your, if you and I more metabolically healthy, we're more likely to make antibodies compared to Joe Sixpack who's eating McDonald's. So anyway, it's only a $50 test. I think it's worthwhile doing.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that because like I said, I believe that I had it, but every single person you talk to has a story they believe they had it. So I'm reluctant to say that,
Did you lose your sense of smell or taste?
I did lose my sense of smell very bad on a different occasion, a couple months later.
Okay.
But this was in, what would it have been? March.
Early.
Of last, like right at the beginning.
Yeah.
But as a police officer, I was in the international terminal a lot at the airport. And
that makes sense.
If anyone is going to get it on an early wave, probably be someone that worked an international terminal.
Totally.
And I just got the worst fever that I've ever had. And it was to the point where it literally looked like I dumped like a gallon of water in my bed when I woke up in the morning.
Crazy.
It looked like I pissed the bed. And, but the weird thing is like I'd wake up and I'd feel kind of shitty and then I'd be able to shake it off and go about my day. I could still work out. I could still, like I went snowboarding the night of the worst fever, but then I'd go to bed and then get hit by the fever and the sweat again.
Crazy.
And I've never had anything like that. And it was so bizarre and different that then once they started talking about COVID, I was like, okay, well,
maybe I had it.
Maybe that's what it was,
No shortness of breath or anything.
No.
Yeah.
But then I've had other friends that are like really good athletes that are like, just like you said, I was sore for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
I sweat. I was sweating a lot at night. Yeah. But no respiratory stuff for me either. Yeah.
So
it's worth testing. I mean, it's been a year. Who knows? But I mean, it's kind of cool, as we finish up. There's your body's immunologic memory has some redundancy.
Okay.
So it's not just the immunoglobulin antibodies, you have your T cell immunity as well. But that's harder to test for. You have to like put your T cells in a petri dish and researchers do that. But that again, that T cell immunity and immunological memory is lasts longer than the antibodies.
Got it. Okay.
So that's why people are saying like, well, you need to get the vaccine because antibodies go down. Where you're like, well, there was from the first SARS outbreak and then MERS, some healthcare workers still have T cell immunity up from 18 years ago.
Oh shit.
So it seems that that's more lasting and that T cell immunity has more crossover with just novel, because there's 6 different coronaviruses, right? And there's a lot of like homology or shared proteins between all of these. And there's enough with SARS COVI2 and other common cold coronaviruses that your your memory T cells say, hey, we recognize you. Let's ramp up immunity.
Got it.
So there was one study that found that people who recently had a coronavirus related cold actually had lower rates of death and hospitalizations.
Oh, really?
Because of that cross-reactive immunologic memory. Anyway, it's cool stuff.
Shocking to think that like allowing your immune system to do its job ended up being beneficial.
Right.
And
then you're like, well, you took kids out of school. So then we prevented all of that, community common cold. Yeah. So what is that going to do once everyone starts remingling.
Well, I got an interesting story for you
Yeah.
before we wrap this up. Is one of my wife's, I don't know if it's a friend or someone she follows on Instagram, but she told her she's a teacher and their school opened back up and all the kids are masked and socially distanced. And a cold came through and every single kid in the room has a cold.
Wow.
Every single one. So what are we doing here?
Right. Let's just let them be kids, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in the country of Sweden, this was a scientist, I just shared this yesterday. He got censored for exposing this information. He's a pediatrician.
I saw that.
They didn't close schools. Only 15 kids made it to the ICU in the entire country where schools were not closed. Granted, Sweden is small, but 15 kids out of probably hundreds of thousands of children, 15 went to the ICU because of COVID.
And also, what was their body composition like?
Well,
I'd like to know that.
High percentage of them had comorbid conditions.
There you go. Because that's not, I mean, kids aren't immune to that. I mean, my same buddy that I referenced with the face shield, he went to Queens because they were asking for doctors.
Yeah.
And so at the height of COVID, he went to Queens, New York and had 200 COVID patients. And he's like, bro, we were literally like having 3, 4, 5 layers deep of gurneys where we'd have to pull people out just to tend to the needs of people that are like, we were so understaffed and we didn't have what we needed. But he said every single person overweight and unhealthy. So, I mean,
it's crazy though. I mean, it's like the media wants to ignore that.
Yeah.
To create the illusion that these are perfectly healthy people.
And that doesn't make it like any less tragic or it's not degrading that person as a human being. But at the end of the day, let's talk about personal responsibility and what's happening, you know?
Right.
And so, and he said, he goes, the reason the ventilators were a death sentence is because once you're on a vent, you can no longer eat, you can no longer drink. So now we're having to manage people's caloric intake. We're having to manage their hydration. And he's like, we were already struggling to make it work as is. And he's like, the workload just grows exponentially. And it was funny. He said that that machine, there was like that Elon Musk was promoting, there was like a CPAP on steroids.
Okay.
He's like, that proved to be the most beneficial because if they're hungry, they can eat, you know, if they're thirsty, they can drink.
Scuba diving type mask or something like that, or?
It was just a face shield that worked as a vent. It had like a secure seal around it, but you could remove it at will instead of having to be intubated.
Yeah.
You know?
Who would have thought? I mean,
so basically if Elon Musk says something, just listen to him.
So smart, dude.
You know, it's funny. They're coming after him now too.
I know.
You see that?
Yeah.
For currency manipulation.
Right.
Because he said the Dogecoin thing.
Yeah.
Like nobody gets out alive if you don't stand with the system. They come after you. Richest man in the world.
I know.
They're going after him.
It's crazy, man.
You know?
And I mean, he's gonna help. I think. Yeah. It's what's cool is seeing him like voice against some of the stuff, like leave California and move tests. That was awesome.
Smoke pot with Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Oh, dude, that's awesome.
Well, good, man.
Good to chat, buddy.
Yeah. We did 2 hours and 40 minutes. That's a long show.
That is a long one.
But yeah. But like I said, we kind of hit it from both our platforms. So I think listeners will either appreciate that or they'll hate it.
Yeah, they'll like,
why'd you have this cop on your show that's supposed to be about health? But
right.
No, I appreciate you having me on. And
yeah,
likewise, I appreciate you coming on mine. And let's get some jiu-jitsu in soon.
That'd be awesome. I would love that. Thanks so much, buddy. And yeah, thanks for having the courage to make that video and just inspire a lot of people.
Cool,
Give me
man.
hope for America.
I appreciate it.
Well, my friend, that's it for today. Thanks as always for tuning all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this conversation with Greg. I'll put links to some of the books we talk about and some of the research that we do mention below in the show notes. But definitely check out Greg over on his channel and his podcast, Endless Endeavor. And if you enjoyed this message and want to share this with a friend or family member, you can always tag me over on Instagram and share this and take a screenshot of that. And if you really want to pay it forward and you enjoyed this, you can leave us a little bit of feedback in iTunes. That goes a long way. That helps us. That helps people like you that want to learn more about natural ways to improve their health. But until next time, hopefully you have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll catch you on a future podcast down the road. Be well.